Namaskar and welcome to Late Edition. Well, the digital flight data recorder, or the black box of the crashed Air India Boeing 737 plane in Mangalore, was found today. The black box is reported to be intact and it would contain crucial information about the crash in which 158 persons were killed. Now, 4 teams of investigators, they were from engineering, from operations, from ATC and aerodrome units. They made several rounds of inspection of the wreckage, the runway and the adjoining areas of the accident site in the hunt for the black box, which will provide authentic information as to what went wrong at the last moment before the flight was set to land.
As far as the black box goes, you may have already got the news. It's just been retrieved a little while ago. That is a DGCA area of specialization. They will be doing investigation now that they have got the black box. But what I would like to add here is that our Air India flight safety team that has been assisting the DGCA in this entire process, in fact, they have been working for so many hours without a break trying to search for that DFDR. The person that you saw on the television, in fact, holding the black box is an Air India person. We ourselves are involved in assisting the DDCA to find that box. And Mr. Matthew is from our flight safety department, who you saw holding that black box. And we are going to continue to assist in all the requirements of the DDCA. Whatever they need from us as an airline, we will support.
Well, to put all this into perspective for us and help us understand what's going to happen now once the black box has been found, and also about aviation safety, they're joined in the studio by Mr. Mark D. Martin, an aviation expert. He was formerly with the DGCA Regulation Committee, also Chief of Strategy at SpiceJet earlier, and has been with the aviation industry for a very, very long time. Now that the black box has been found, what happens?
Well, Mark, I think the most critical part now is to download the data for the black box. And while the black box forms just one part of the investigation, a lot of what you see from the wreckage, from eyewitness reports, from the runway, tire marks, the path the aircraft took, I think once you start putting pieces of the puzzle together, the actual cause of the crash should come out. Now, typically, black box, to decipher the black box, it's a hardy piece of equipment, and nothing can go wrong with it, whether it's fire or water or whatever. Now, once you start decoding it, it can take you anywhere between 30 days up to 6 months.
Okay.
But typically, it's all digital now. There was a time when it used to be printed on manual paper, or a graph which is on paper.
Okay.
But now it's on computer, and this should speed up the investigation process. In fact, usually investigations are led by the DGCA. Now, the global trend today for air crash investigations is that there's a very active private participation in that investigation, because you have pressure groups, you have passenger associations, you have external bodies who want to know the cause of the crash, public liability, civil suits. And that's one of the reasons why including the aircraft manufacturer, the airline also come on board, because end of the day it's a Boeing crash and the plane belongs to Boeing.
Fair enough. But what happens if can the black box tell us whether the tire burst, for instance, or if that was the case?
Pretty much.
Pretty much.
In fact, most of the critical vital parameters which are there in an airplane, from your tire pressure to hydraulic pressure to your airspeed, your flap settings, your air brake settings, because each of these elements are usually controlled by some sense of a hydraulic element. Once you get the black box data, it just comes in black and white, exactly what happened in the last 30 minutes. Now, while the black box can give you data from the time he took off from Mangalore, went to Dubai and came back, usually the last 45 minutes to 1 hour before the crash occurs is what's considered most important, and that data is usually intact and secure.
Right. If we look now at safety aspects, some say that these tabletop airports are dangerous airports, but many pilots who have spoken to us after this incident took place have said that there's nothing wrong with a tabletop airport. I mean, it requires just maybe a little skill, but there's nothing wrong with the airport as such. What would you say? I mean, how does one make these kind of airports more safe?
Well, there was a time when Mangalore had a 5,300-foot runway, but that's not the case anymore. Now it's 8,033 feet. The typical distance you need for a Boeing 737 is you could take it off from 6,000 feet as well. Tabletop runways, I mean, let's be honest, you have more aggressive terrain runways in India. You know, Agati being one, where you have to literally, your threshold is almost on the sea. You know,
Right.
you have Leh, you have Thois, even Bombay for that matter. You have buildings on either side. You have a sea up front. You have a cliff on your ILS approach path. So Bombay is also considered quite an aggressive terrain airport, because you got huge residential catchments
Right.
on either side. So it's not about the runway. I think Mangalore as a runway.
So typically in airports like this, what is required? I mean, to make the ILS for one should be there,
Right.
but to make everything safe for the landing and the takeoff,
Right.
what really is required?
See, one is there's enough training that the DGCA has put down for all pilots. You have a route check, you have a LR check, you have a sector check, you have an airport check, and each check is literally a test where you have a pilot or instructor or an examiner who sits behind the pilot and the co-pilot. Once he checks him out on a particular airport, on a particular route, only then the pilot's allowed to fly into that airport, because you're carrying lives on board. The DGCA believes in that as criticality, and so does every airline and every aviation regulator in the world puts that factor high. Now, for an airport like Mangalore, for
Right.
instance, once they extend the runway to 8,000 feet, it has about 35,000 landings to its record today.
Right.
You know, I've personally flown into Mangalore when I was advising the Civil Aviation Ministry. I've jump seated on a 320, and it was night. You know, so pilots are familiar with it. In fact, 8,000-foot runway is a good landing roll typically. And the only problem with the Mangalore is you have to do a 180 backtrack, where you got to do a U-turn and you got to come all the way back to the terminal.
Okay.
That's the only issue which pilots get irritated about. But usually weather is not much of an issue, and tabletop runways again is not much of a concern, because by the time you're airborne, you're way away from the cliff.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, for landing with the tabletop runway, I mean, supposing you just swerve off the runway, you're gone, isn't it?
Right.
But if it's a flat land, then at least you can probably control yourself a little bit.
Well, I mean, if you look at the effect of damage that can come to an airplane, it's not about the tabletop runway. Yes, that looks more aggressive and looks more scary, but then you can create equal amount of or even more harm or damage to your aircraft in case you swerve off the runway in any airport.
Okay.
The amount of ground equipment you have, the amount of antennas you have sticking out, from the ILS beacon to the ILS antenna. So it's everywhere. I mean, pilots know where to land there. But the only issue with this whole Mangalore airport thing is that it's just been positioned as this airport to be.
Okay, that's because of the unfortunate incident that took place.
Sure.
But 1 in 4 crashes apparently take place because of landing, and on landing, and many of them are because of pilot error. So, I mean, is there, let's say, after the ILS system came into existence, that should have come down, isn't it? But what would you say? I mean, is it our pilots not being trained well enough these days, or what?
Well, see, the ILS is a navigation aid. It brings you on the glide path. Okay, pilots use it as a primary navigation reference, so that you come on the right glide path. ILS came in when ILS actually eased when you had low visibility in operation, when you couldn't see the runway clearly, when it was raining, when you had fog,
Right.
winters. ILS just made your life more simpler. Traditionally, pilots typically would always do a thing called a visual approach, where you just see the runway, you make a turn on what you call a left base, you come in on a visual approach where you're looking at the runway visually, right? So an ILS, yes, eased the job. But as far as training goes, there's intense level of trainings that usually pilots are put through. For example, when a pilot goes for a simulator check, he's given situations and scenarios where the aircraft is completely out of control. It's in a situation where it cannot be recovered, and they give the pilot in a simulator, they ask him to recover from that and make the aircraft land safely. Yeah. So given they're forced into seeing the most frightful situations in aviation, and they're asked to come out of it. Yeah.
And what would you say about the Boeing 737 itself as an aircraft? I mean, it's been for a very long time now. Maybe 1969 or something.
Right,
it was
right.
first.
Sure.
The first form of 7 came into existence. So, has it served its purpose, or what?
Well, the 7 families,
Yeah,
as
right.
you rightly said, came out in 1969 to 71. But then from the 7700 series, now we're seeing
800,
the
900,
NG,
yeah.
you know, which the NG came out sometime in in 89-90 after the Classic, which was the most popular aircraft. It's one of the most advanced airplanes today. It has almost every single safety element and safety at board. You have some of the best now avionics and navigation and onboard computer equipment that can make a good decision, fly well. For example, you have dual FMS or dual flight management computers. It's an EFIS, electronic flight information system, which is basically completely digital. There's no gauges anywhere. There was a time when I'm sure we would have seen on TV analog gauges.
Okay.
Those don't anymore. You know, you have a weather radar on board. You have ground proximity warning system. You have a traffic avoidance system.
Okay.
So in some of these airplanes, you also have a head-up display. Like in fighter airplanes, you have a head-up display. Civilian aircraft have it. So the kind of this aircraft today is state-of-the-art.
Now, when we talk about state-of-the-art, do pilots, I mean, should they retire at a certain, let's say in their 50s or something? Eyesight may be a problem or something like that. Would you? What is the risk? How long should a pilot be flying?
Well, you know, it's as simple as this, Mark. You know, when you're it's like pretty much, you know, when you're a journalist or when you're a doctor, the more you're at the more you work, the more you gain. The more situations you see, the better each and every episode and experience of your work adds to your experience.
But isn't there a critical angle that one probably passes at a certain stage? I
Currently,
mean, a pilot who has great experience may have landed at Leh, you know, in a Dakota or something. You probably can't think that he may know how to fly the plane, but at his age, probably not right to kind of pilot for today.
Currently, the DGC has kept retirement age for pilots at 60.
Right.
Okay? That's for a commander, a person who's in command of the airplane. But if you want to, but they're for 65, so that you can also fly as a co-pilot. You know, you could also have a co-pilot beyond 60 years old. Now, pretty much, this is the world standard today in aviation. Now, pilots who are in the 68 or in the 70s, who are far more experienced, and some of their perspectives is unbelievable when it comes to flying.
Right.
You know. Simply Captain Sullenberger, who landed the US Airways aircraft in the Hudson.
Right, absolutely.
He was 59.
Okay.
He was in retirement.
Right.
And he saved almost every life on board because he was a naval pilot. He knew how to ditch an airplane.
Right.
You know. So experience adds, yes, but rightly said, the human factor element comes in. Things like it could be age, could be reaction time. Because let's be honest, you know, a cockpit is an office for a pilot.
Right.
That's where he works. He carries his home tension, he carries his his workloads. If he's had a fight with his wife or his girlfriend, that's where he lets his steam out, you know. He can't let his steam out because he has lives on board to fly.
Right, absolutely. Finally, Mr. Martin, what lessons have we learned in Mangalore, and what could be done now to sort of improve the situation, one would think?
I think what should emerge from this is the investigation should bring forth critical sets of recommendations which are needed in terms of training, in terms of flight performance management.
Right.
There might be something else, maybe a change in airport design for that matter, maybe additional aid that an airport should need, or some sort of some sense of an extension. A lot of it will come from what they find wrong.
Okay.
You know.
So it ultimately, what is the investigation and what the investigation tells us. We thank you very much, Mark D. Martin, for joining us here on Date Edition.
Thanks, Mark.
Well, we're going to take another quick break, and when back, we look at Indo-Turkmenistan relations. Do stay with us.